We are farmers, bum 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 bum.
Money problems for the farmers, overproduction, drop in the price numbers. The dry climate, crops are dying out, but workers struggle too, industries throughout. Minimum wage, there's mouths to feed, 10 hours a day for what they need. Child labor, pollution, chemicals, discontent of Americans.
Working conditions. Workers relied on the wages they earned, while farmers depended on the quality and amount of harvested crops, which was negatively impacted by the limited rainfall, trees, fresh water, and soil. Industrial workers suffered from extremely poor working conditions. By 1890, they worked on average 60 hours a week. Many workers were exposed to harmful chemicals that led to illnesses and early death. Children and women were exposed to the same conditions, but were paid a fraction of their adult male counterparts. Published in 1878 by Isaac G. Blanchard, a newspaper editor in Boston, and Jesse Henry Jones, 8 Hours depicted extreme conditions of workers and advocated for a shorter workday, becoming an anthem for many. Money was an issue for both farmers and workers. As the majority of the money was in the hands of the elite, workers and farmers struggled to survive. Unskilled workers received about 10 cents an hour, so they had to live in slums. Deflation was a prime issue for farmers. Crop prices dropped, leaving limited profit and large debts. Overproduction of crops also contributed to the low prices.
Railroads taking all the profits, charging high rates to ship crops to market. Granger laws to regulate the rates, but Supreme Court rules to maintain one's interstate. Trucks of form, they enrage as industries cut the wage. Great railroad strike, prices increase, but shut down by police. Even as we cry out, industries don't hear, keeps lowering. Wage 25% cut off and keep firing. Workers of home, and even as we boycott, Supreme Court still stands up against us workers' lives.
In 1868, a group of farmers seeking to better their conditions with extremely high rates on railroad shipping and storage formed the National Grange Movement. In the Supreme Court case of Munn v. Illinois of 1877, farmers gained a partial victory, with the court declaring that states could regulate private properties for railroads. However, 9 years later in Wabash v. Illinois, the court ruled that individual states could not regulate interstate railroad rates, leaving farmers with the same issues. Farmers used alliances with each other to achieve political change, while industrial workers used strikes.
Strikes were mainly caused by worker discontent over sudden wage cuts or firing of workers, which was made possible by the formation of trusts, which made certain industries able to manage money as they wished. For example, the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad slashed workers' wages by 10% in the Great Railroad Strike of 1877, and workers refused to work or allow trains to operate until their wages were restored. Local militias and police used violence to stop the strike, resulting in 100 dead. The Pullman strike resulted from the Pullman Company firing a third of its workforce and cutting wages by 25%. In 1894, Eugene V. Debs led the strike and refused to work on Pullman cars, which backfired, as Debs and others were arrested under interfering with federal mail. The strike ended with over a dozen dead after 2,000 troops were sent to stop the strike. The government generally sided with the businesses, leading workers to view them as corrupt.
This political cartoon illustrated industrial workers' outcry against the Pullman Railroad strike, as Pullman is depicted as crushing the workers with wage cuts and high living conditions. The historical context is during the Gilded Age, when fat or wealthy businessmen who had all the money overworked and underpaid their workers in order for them to profit the most for their business.
Labor unions, addressing problems through labor unions. The Knights of Labor fought for basic rights, equal pay, income tax, fight child labor, but were called dangerous by the press. While the farmers form alliances, form cooperatives and advocate improved economy, later create populism.
Alliances and unions. After industrialization, farmers began to protest against railroads because they charged high rates and against expensive machinery. They banded together in farmers' alliances, using a variety of measures to better their situation. The Farmers and Colored Farmers Alliances had issues with each other, but came together in the Ocala Platform in 1890 to discuss farmers' rights. During the Burlington Strike of 1888, labor unions showed their discontent by hurling rocks and bricks towards the strikebreakers that were used to shut them down. Labor unions sought to give workers more rights by organizing large strikes to protest. The American Railroad Union, led by Eugene Debs, was focused on condemning wage cuts. The Knights of Labor mainly aimed to end child labor. Ideas such as income tax and the 8-hour workday were goals of both. Labor unions also had to struggle with employers using strikebreakers, militia, and blacklisting workers to stop them.
Populism is the political ideology that power belongs in the hands of the common people rather than the elite. Formed through the Omaha Platform of 1892, populists advocated for the direct election of senators and laws, unlimited coinage of silver for inflation, graduated income tax, public ownership of railroads, loans to stabilize crop prices, and the 8-hour workday. Populism benefited both farmers and industrial workers, and they were strongly against immigrants and minority groups. They were also extremely scornful towards the wealthy, as described in an excerpt of The Populist Revolt, a history of the Farmers' Alliance and the People's Party by John D. Hicks. Hicks wrote, "The fruits of the toil of millions are boldly stolen to build up colossal fortunes for a few, and the possessors of these, in turn, despise the republic and endanger liberty. The two great classes, tramps and millionaires." He reflects the prevailing idea of the Populist Party, blaming much of the people's problems on the great wealth of the top elite.
Following the fall of the Populist Party rose the Progressivism movement, which was based on people's rights in response to the social ills of the Gilded Age. Progressive activists feared the consequences of unregulated expansion, extreme corporate power, and a corrupt political system. This movement mainly consisted of economists, social workers, and the young middle class in urban cities, compared to the rural farmer domination of populism. Progressive action also used government intervention for public interest, thus producing laws regulating housing, factory safety, child labor, schooling, and liquor sales. Under progressive reform, the American women's rights movement eventually secured for women the right to vote in 1920. In addition, they called for gender equality, fought for federal support for working children and women, and supported many women's causes.
The political cartoon shown depicts the prevailing ideas of the populist and progressive movement, suggesting that the Senate and federal officials were dominated by big businesses and trusts using a corrupt hand to ignore the issues of the public. This was a clear factor in fueling advocations for the rights of the middle and lower classes as politics became dominated by the elite.
1892, Omaha Platform farmers gather, form a new party, and of laissez-faire matter. Return power deserved to farmers, did go long with a fresh new start. Progressivism trying to impart reform, poverty, child labor, drugs, inclusive to all education, working conditions.
Organized labor in the 20th century. As the Great Depression pushed the economy into an extreme financial state, another wave of labor activism rose. In 1935, the Congress of Industrial Organization was created to support industrial workers. In 1955, the CIO reconciled with the AFL and formed the AFL-CIO, the largest confederation of unions in the United States today. The AFL-CIO extended its power through America and negotiated for fair treatment and security. They still faced issues like allowing low-income earners and marginalized groups to become members, but eventually closed that gap in the 1960s when they supported the civil rights movement. In the 1970s, they abolished child labor and established equal pay for all, illustrating a change in industrial society through unions.